culture movement. Started by this guy here, Felix Adler, in the late 1800s. He was the son of a rabbi. He was expected to become a rabbi himself, but there was just one little problem. He was a bit too much of a free thinker. And when he got out there and talked to people, he was giving an address in front of his father's congregation where he served as a rabbi and where he was expected to step in as a rabbi. Well, he stepped up there and basically spoke his mind, and the people said, guess what? You're a little bit too much of a free thinker for us. And so that was the end of his ambitions to become a rabbi, because his vision was to do away with rituals, creeds, dogma, and ideology in religion. And without knowing it, this guy here was really the pioneer of what we now know as the spiritual but not religious movement in this country. This is a great example of evolving religion. Religion evolving from that hidebound organization that puts a rubber stamp on everything that the powers that be to an organization that helps to promote free thinking, that helps people to begin to find their own way spiritually. Felix Adler believed that people could be good and moral and ethical without the need for religion and theology. And the key was to emphasize action rather than belief. So, 1877, he founded the Society of Ethical Culture in New York City. And they concentrated on social action, specifically aimed at serving the poor, especially children who were living in poverty. These are some of the things that they accomplished. And again, stuff that I'd never heard of before. They offered nursing services for sick people in tenement communities. They established a free school, a kindergarten, where children received early education as well as food and clothing if they needed it. They championed child labor reform and housing regulations that were designed to establish basic standards of safety and sanitation in the tenement housing that was in New York back in those days. And you've heard the stories about that. Now, that was their domestic agenda. At the international level, you might perhaps have expected them to be pacifists. But they recognized the need to act in defense of self and others, provided that the goal was truly liberty and democracy and security, rather than imperialism in support of commercial interests. That was their focus. Adler's ideas were based on what he called a supreme ethical rule. Supreme ethical rule, which very simply goes like this: act so as to bring out the best in others and thereby in yourself. That's a variation on the golden rule, isn't it? In fact, I think if we really got the golden rule and maybe put together a few more variations on it, that's all we need. We don't need dogmas and creeds and ideology. If we were ever able to get the golden rule and all of its nuance and splendor. The other thing that Adler taught is that virtue has to be its own reward. You're good for the sake of being good, not for a reward that comes later. Virtue must be its own reward, or else it's not really a virtue. And this was a real departure from traditional religious teachings, because traditional religion emphasized the idea that you followed the commandments and you engaged in ethical conduct in order to receive the reward of eternal life, not being sent to hell, and all of this would happen after you were dead. You were good in order to avoid punishment, which doesn't sound like a very mature expression of our human potential, does it? Evolving religion. Now, in the United States today, there are around 25 centers that operate as part of the ethical culture movement, or as they are now being called, ethical communities. Ethical communities. 25. Sounds small, doesn't it? then again, they don't go door to door promising heaven and eternal life in exchange for saying you believe in something. You know, this is truly a grassroots movement, and they want people who are committed to ethical conduct, to ethical action, and to living these values. And nobody is forced or guilted or feared into coming and joining them to do good. They're all about action, or as Felix Adler would say, deeds, not creeds. Deeds, not creeds. So if you were to visit one of these centers on a Sunday, I've never been, but I've been doing some reading about it. If you visit an ethical community, you'll find that they have basically a Sunday service. They have a community gathering. They have music. They have speakers. They may be small in number, but the real power is in ideas. And when I look at the guiding principles that the different groups working as ethical communities are advancing, I see something powerful. So these are the core values of the American Ethical Union that these different organizations are loosely organized around. Listen and see how many of them speak to you. Every person is important and unique. Every person deserves to be treated fairly and kindly. I can learn from everyone. I am a part of the earth. I cherish it and all life upon it. I learn from the world around me by using my senses, mind, and feelings. I am a member of the world community, which depends on the cooperation of all people for peace and justice. I can learn from the past to build for the future. I am free to question. I am free to choose what I believe. I accept responsibility for my choices and actions. I strive to live my values. I view ethics as my religion. Not a single one of those that doesn't resonate in some way. We talk about evolving religion. It's all around us, and it's going to play a powerful role in helping us to be knowledgeable and awake. Ethical principles are the foundation of that kind of awakening. Evolving religion is all around us. The process has been going on since the Protestant Reformation, which opened the way for competing ideas and for competing interpretations. That's a long time. Religion is finally evolving into something that is going to transcend religion altogether, which is a good thing because, as I said before, religion has done a pretty lousy job of being an effective force for promoting peace in the world. They talk a good game, but it always comes down to my tribe is better than your tribe, and I'll kill you if you don't agree with me. And the interesting thing is that a lot of religious groups would look at an ethical community founded on those principles that I just talked about there. You know, they don't mention the word God or Jesus once in those principles. So a lot of religious groups would look at them and call them atheists, as if that label is somehow definitive of anything. One of the things that ethical communities demonstrate clearly is that it's possible to be good without a belief in God or without a belief in any other kind of complex theology or even metaphysics. You know, I still hear groups demanding that Christian prayer be required in public schools, along with teaching biblical creationism and other things like that. Well, how about teaching our young people ethics and critical thinking skills so that they can develop their own value system and own it? a value system that they will live because they were instrumental in creating it, in buying into it, and then owning it. I know in Unity we're all about positive thinking. It's a good thing. And I do try to avoid pessimism. Yeah, it's a struggle sometimes because as I observe our larger culture, I'm increasingly convinced that there are powers at work that do not want an alert and knowledgeable citizenry. The reason I don't become pessimistic when I think about that is because, and this is such an obvious truth, everything we need to become alert and knowledgeable is freely available. It's no secret. Nothing is hidden. Books are not being banned. Think about it. Books are not being burned. All of the great ideas of history, they're available in every single library and every single town on the planet, or at least in this country, and now on the internet. And the great tragedy is that soldiers died to protect our freedom, right? We hear this, they died to protect our liberty, they died to protect our freedom. And we need to reflect on how deep that word freedom goes, because the freedom that they died to protect, at least a big part of it, is the freedom to think for ourselves, right? The freedom to think for ourselves. They died to protect our freedom to think for ourselves, and then we fail to exercise that hard-won freedom. And the only barrier is one that is self-imposed. The only barrier is this idea that we're somehow not capable of thinking for ourselves, and that we need to be given some kind of pre-packaged, pre-canned ideology and a set of talking points that we simply parrot instead of taking it deeper and thinking for ourselves and creating a value system that we own, which is the only way, in my humble opinion, to become knowledgeable and alert and awake. So I hold up the values of ethical culture as one of the ways to help us to bring that into our lives in a deeper way. And maybe this Memorial Day, as part of honoring the sacrifices that we are here to commemorate today, we can choose going forward to be informed and awake. We can choose to live our values in memory of all of those who made the greatest sacrifice so that we can have that freedom. A freedom that we won't take for granted and that we will make a part of our lives going forward. I was going to say Happy Memorial Day. Isn't that interesting? We kind of toss that word around sometimes, Happy Memorial Day. Let's make it a blessed Memorial Day and a deeply meaningful Memorial Day and commit to do something real. God bless you all. See you next time.